two psychiatrists rapping about our lives and work.
This podcast is not intended to be medical advice. Any stories we use have been altered to protect identities and sensitive information.
This is intended for entertainment purposes only.
You know it!
Ow!
Welcome back to The Good Shrinks. We're glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, I think today we'll talk about weather, the moon, and if it impacts our mental health or not.
Yeah, we're interested in that because, we work in an emergency room, and we have noticed, at least I can speak for myself, I feel like I have noticed patterns with people coming into the emergency room, especially during full moons. I feel like if it's a really busy night, I know staff will look at each other and go, is it a full moon? Is today a full? I mean, it is definitely an association that we have with a rise in mental health crises.
Yeah.
Crises.
I completely agree with that. Like, whenever we're really busy, I do it, the staff does it. It's like, is it a full moon tonight or what's going on out there, And I think we do sort of associate the two, like whether it impacts people's mental health. Some of that may stem from even like media, right? Like you watch movies and the full moon turns people into werewolves, and it just has a feeling in culture.
Yeah, I mean, the moon definitely changes or is correlated with the tides. Like there is definitely some effect that the moon has on the earth. So it sort of stands to reason that it may affect us too in some way.
Yeah, and that's what we'll dive into today is there an impact by climate, lunar cycles, even solar eclipses? It's funny you bring up the tides. If you look back in history, actually, of course, everything falls back to the Greeks, okay? So I guess Aristotle pointed out that, like, the brain was the moistest organ in the body. And so I guess he felt at the time that, like, as tides are affected, right, by the moon, then if the brain is the moistest organ, then maybe fluid shifts would have an impact on people. And so there was that association even a long time ago.
Makes sense. I mean, people were trying to put it together because they probably noticed these changes too in people, and they were trying to figure it out. And, Aristotle didn't have
modern medicine
or, a microscope or any kind of thing to really do any kind of rigorous research. So it was a lot of philosophy or a lot of thinking about what could the association be.
And one thing about the full moon, right, is it keeps the night brighter than it typically is. And so I think probably back in history, individuals may have been sleeping a little bit less during the full moon, which may have led to people acting more bizarrely than typical. And so I think there may have been more of an association like in history, Because we do know that sleep is a crucial factor in lots of different mental disorders or altered sleep patterns.
You need your sleep to have a stable mood.
100%.
I wonder if there is some association between sleep alteration and the full moon. Like, what have we noticed about, or what do we know about the full moon and how it affects our sleep?
I think there have been some studies that looked into that somewhat, and it appeared that the full moon did have some impact on sleep duration. So people were sleeping about 20 minutes less a night, and REM sleep, which is our dream phase of sleep, was decreased by, it said, up to 30%, which I was kind of surprised that there was an effect on sleep from the moon cycles.
Well, then that certainly explains why your sleep being altered that way could affect, especially if you had like certain mood disorders like major depression or bipolar disorder even, because we know decreased need for sleep is one of the critical symptoms, one of the diagnostic criteria for bipolar disorder. So if people are getting less sleep and feel like they don't need as much sleep, then that definitely is something that could shoot them into a manic episode.
They're shown like circadian rhythm, right, has an impact and can lead to mania. Like we see that with patients where they're like, I just started sleeping less and less hours each night, and it's just kind of like a slow spiral
and
into
then
that.
Boom.
And then you're like, bam. Yeah.
In the emergency room. I mean, I remember
then we're like, hi.
Did you not was it a full moon? Did it keep you up? I remember one of the busiest nights. Actually, one of the first times that I worked in the emergency room. It was a full moon cycle, and this guy comes up to the window, and we notice immediately that he has no clothes on. And we asked him, what is happening? How did you arrive here in this state? And he was like, I drove myself there. I drove myself because I needed to get some help. I'm really not doing well. I was like, well, what's going on? And we're talking to him. He's trying to climb in through this is when we had one of those slide, like when you go to a drive-through window and it has like that slide.
Like a fast food restaurant?
Yes, it was like a fast food. So he was trying to open that and slide into so he was very, hyperactive, very agitated. And turned out he did have bipolar disorder. And not only did he drive, I was like, at what point did you take your clothes off? He's like in the car. And so he was driving intoxicated, no clothes on. And somehow made his way to the emergency room, which was good.
Sounds like a pretty good Saturday night to me.
So, yeah, I don't know if the full moon had an effect on him, but he had bipolar disorder, and it was a full moon, and he was psychotic.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, we kind of tie everything together, right? Like we associate things, and I guess we'll kind of determine, right, whether there's some connection. I guess before we do, T, for you, do you feel like the weather has an impact on you typically, like just for your mood?
Just in general, I feel like, if it's a sunny day, I definitely feel happier. I can, feeling the sun on my skin and feeling the sun on my face. I think it does put me in a pretty good mood. And just the opposite, when it's rainy, I don't necessarily get depressed, but I feel like I get more reflective.
Yeah.
Everything kind of quiets down, and I'm more likely to watch something romantic or sappy on TV, just sort of hibernate and want to stay in under the covers.
Yeah. So. I kind of feel the same way. I was sort of thinking like, going to the beach, like you feel so much better sometimes by the end of the week, and it's like, well, is it because you're on vacation and like you're just having a good time? Does the sun have some impact over a period of time?
Many variables. It's hard to suss out what is actually causing what. Mm-hmm. See, do you notice a difference with the kind of people that present depending on the weather? Like if it's more in the fall or the winter, do you notice any differences in the kind of people that come in and what they're talking about?
That's actually a really great question. I don't know if I notice a difference in the types of patients. I will say that it definitely is focused on that if we're busier and there is like a weather phenomenon, then we're like, okay, it's tied to this. The only time I would say we kind of focus on something is like if it's really, really cold outside, and then a lot more homeless people come in for evaluation.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know if it's necessarily a type of diagnosis or type of psychiatric disorder that comes in. Like let's say during a full moon, it just feels like it's more. Does that make sense?
And I think we see more, I'd say, depression in the wintertime. I think maybe either because of decreased sunlight, because, the daylight savings time, you lose an hour the fall months and winter time, so you have less daylight. Definitely, seasonal affective disorder sort of presents during that time frame. So you can see mood alterations depending on the weather.
I agree with that, the seasonal affective disorder. There are a lot of individuals in the fall, winter that start feeling more depressed or saying it is having an effect on them just because there's like less light exposure. So that is true. That is probably one thing that we've noticed in the ER. A little bit maybe not off topic, but kind of going along with this theme is this, I had this one patient one time, it was Halloween, right? And he was psychotic, and he comes in and he could tell he was like freaking out. I was like, what's going on? He's like, man, I'm seeing ghosts.
Trick or treat.
And then I was like, oh, and then I was actually still in residency then, so I was like, oh no. And then I thought about it. I'm like, well, he probably saw some trick-or-treaters outside.
Hopefully.
Right? Hopefully, actually, yeah. But I thought that was kind of, just kind of a funny tidbit. But, we looked into studies and information about weather phenomena and mental health. There was a study that looked at the moon cycles, and this was a study that took place in Buffalo, New York between September 2013 and July 2018. And it just looked at the relationship between restraints and psychiatric emergencies in the hospital 14 days before and after a full moon. So if you were to sort of take a guess, T, do you think the full moon had an impact on restraints and aggression while these individuals were in the hospital?
Well, if we think that there is an association and people get more aggressive or agitated during a full moon, then I would think that you would have seen some kind of change in the number of restraints because, we use restraints for people who are highly agitated, who are threatening themselves or one of us or somebody, in their direct vicinity. So we have to physically keep them from acting on those urges. So that's what a restraint is.
Yeah.
So did they show any difference in restraints?
Well,
Dang.
so the studies actually showed that there was lower restraint use for the period prior to the full moon, and there was no change on the date of the full moon. These differences were slight and not significant. So there was this.
So no association.
No association.
At
with
least as measured by restraints.
restraints. Yeah.
Right. There's
So-
lots of things that could
in
not need a restraint.
in our minds.
Right.
There are-
That could not need a restraint, but this could still show that they were agitated.
Yeah, so at least in the study, they were very there is no effect on human behavior and lunar cycles.
In that study.
And there was another study that looked at emergency room presentations and lunar cycles. So the number
Ding,
of
ding, ding. That's us.
That's us. So T, if you were to think about it, do you think there was an increase, a decrease, or a change?
I mean, I just said
Yeah.
that I feel like there's an increase in the number of presentations in the emergency room during a full moon. So is that what the study showed?
Brr.
Dang!
So a 2017 study showed there was no difference between any of the 4 moon phases and
Hacks. They are hacks. Come on. There has to be an
ED
association.
visits. Nothing.
I mean, what are we seeing?
Exactly.
What is happening? At least
Right.
in my research,
And your own personal
in my
research.
own personal experience, it feels like there is association. And the studies show that about 81% of mental health workers feel like there is a relationship between the full moon and human illness. So it's not just me.
No, I mean we all
sort of have this kind of feeling.
notion. And when we started this conversation, we both were in agreement,
Right.
right? So there's some correlation. So there's something called an illusory correlation.
Talk about that.
So it's basically similar to placebo, but it's when we focus our personal experiences and biases in a certain way.
So you're saying I'm biased.
We're both biased, yeah. We're biased. But it says that, so your mind pays attention to certain events, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say something significant happens at your job during a full moon. You're more likely to personally process it and be like, well, it was related to a full moon. If it's not a full moon, you'll forget the memory. So it's, I hope I'm saying it right, illusory
Like those
correlation.
two things are connected because your brain, because it's something odd happening at a time that you think an odd thing should be happening.
Exactly.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that an odd thing is happening.
No.
But you connect it that way.
Yeah, you made that connection.
So it's an illusion.
Yeah.
That correlation is an illusion.
illusion.
And also, you forget the non-events. So you sort of associate the thing, okay, this person's really agitated and it's a full moon. But meanwhile, 6 other people have come in and they're not agitated. But
Yeah.
I don't count them at all.
Exactly. It's like with that one person,
I'm looking for
you're
that
like,
one
man,
person. Yep,
that moon got him.
This is the proof.
The moon got him. So in a sense, the studies really show there's really not any impact that we can see on lunar cycles and human behavior, at least during a psychiatric emergency room visit or an
From the
inpatient
way
stay.
that the way that they've made their studies.
So it's all an illusion, T.
I don't think so. I think we have just not discovered the right measure. What would be the right measure to say actually if a full moon affects you? Is there something that the full moon does to the human body that is there a marker that we could look at? Like when a full moon happens, every human being has X genetic, marker come out.
Yeah,
And we could see if
that would be tough. I mean, we would have to look at like all the different hormone levels, right? Like neurotransmitter levels.
look at the actual genome of the human body to see, what's connected to the moon.
Yeah, that would be tough. But like, how could we sort of measure that?
Measure
in the
something
population?
directly.
Yeah. I was thinking like, what about places like
Maybe in 3024.
Yeah,
100
yeah.
years from now,
Come
we'll
back to this
figure it out.
podcast in 100 years, or 1,000 years. Sorry. Well, not just that, but like, what about individuals that live like in well-lit areas, like cities versus the country?
I was just thinking about Alaska. Now, wouldn't it be great to do? I'm sure that somebody has done, studies on the population of Alaska if there are any changes because they have 6 months of
darkness
and 6 months of light. Like there has to be.
I didn't see any studies. I don't know if you did, T, but like you always hear just from people, it's like You hear suicide rates go up in Alaska during wintertime, depressive rates go up. I'm sure they do, but there wasn't any studies that we saw on that.
No. We'll have to do a deeper dive. Maybe we'll find something.
Yeah.
If we find something, we'll bring it back to the podcast.
Exactly. And besides just like the moon and lunar cycles, so we did look a little bit into climate as well.
Mm-hmm. There did seem to be an association with heat. Like when hotter months were associated more with crime and agitation, murder, I think even.
Mm-hmm, like aggression. Yeah. I mean, I think even like studies have shown in Chicago, like during summer months, like the higher the temperature, the more likely of an event happening. But also just looking at people's perspective of climate, I mean, it's having an effect on people's anxiety and depression. There was like a 2021 global study that looked at younger adults ages 16 to 25, and 75% felt powerless and had negative emotions about climate. 56% felt humanity was doomed.
Oh no.
So I mean, there's all these terms being coined now, like eco anxiety, meteoropaths. Yeah, which is people negatively affected by weather conditions. So all these new terms are sort of popping up in the culture, you know?
I thought this was interesting from that study too, the global survey you were talking about, is that people who felt that their government was failing to act on climate change were more likely to feel eco-distress.
Yeah. And it makes sense, right, T? Is like if you notice the climate is changing, you feel powerless about it. There's an anger towards individuals that lived before you that impacted the climate that you're currently living in. Does that make sense? So it's like you almost feel powerless because it's like not necessarily something you've done, but it's like what humanity has done to the planet over time.
Still doing,
yeah. And so, unlike, like, let's say a nuclear war where it's like, boom, that hits, and then there's travesty, this is like a gradual process, you know?
That could have been prevented if people weren't so greedy and people were more innovative. Tried to start doing some of these, like wind and solar and things earlier so they could be more competitive now. Be easier for people to switch off, their dependence on carbon-based fuels.
Well, also, I wonder if moving forward, like I saw recently some company invented almost like a vacuum system to try and pull carbon out of the air. So I'm like, could we possibly like somehow turn this around? Like, you know what I mean? Like, could we invent something?
So what is happening with that? Are they doing it?
Well, it just started. It was only one system, but I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go. But it's going to
invest in that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, a super vacuum to suck out all of the. I mean, not. You just want to know what the balance is.
Yeah,
we do need to have some
carbon dioxide. Yeah. We overdo it, and then we're like,
and then we're messed up in the opposite direction. And we can't breathe. We're all dead. Anyway.
We just can't win, But, I mean, it is interesting. It's like, can't we come up with something? Because really, I mean, I'm sure the youth, I mean, I just see it all the time online. It's just, they just really...
What's that, Greta something?
Yeah, she just got arrested again, actually. She's like constantly getting arrested.
She's trying to save the planet.
She's trying to get
arrest at a time.
She's getting that photo op every time. It's like she's getting carried away. The two policemen were like holding her up. She's like dangling. I'm like, what is going on?
Let that girl speak. Let her live.
Yeah, I mean, she's trying, She
is.
And kind of looking at whether a lot of the studies were kind of done in Northern Europe, I noticed. There was a Polish study that looked at aggressive behaviors, kind of everything seems to be related to aggressive behaviors and restraints in an inpatient psychiatric unit. And I think that's just because they can go back and record.
It's easier to find.
Record, yeah. So you can find when the restraint happened. And they looked at like different parameters of weather and when the restraints happen and tried to see if there was a statistical significance. So they found the biggest statistically significant events were lower barometric pressure and something there they have called a Frone wind, which I guess is high winds in the mountains. So those two things were shown to have increase in aggression and restraints.
If they came from that area?
In Poland, yeah.
Or if it was happening at that time, like in the hospital?
Oh, I think it was happening while they were in the hospital because they correlated the weather to that day, if that makes sense.
Wow, it's a pretty rapid effect.
Right? It's like, why high winds?
I don't know.
And then lower barometric pressure is interesting too. It's like, do people feel maybe more energy or more discombobulated?
I guess I'd want to know, what does lower barometric pressure do to the human body in general? Mm-hmm. Does it make you feel more anxious? Like, is it a pressure in your body that you can actually feel or perceive?
That's a good question. And that brings maybe just think of like inner ear, like their balance is different, because you have like, fluid shifts in your inner ear.
Because I think lower barometric pressure, I think about precipitation, like rain. I feel like the lower the pressure is, the more likely you're to have precipitation.
Yeah.
So maybe that has something to do with, maybe it was rainy and windy or, whatever at that time. Maybe that's just speculation. I don't actually know what barometric pressure does to the body.
Well, I mean, it's all kind of speculation, but it's interesting, right? I mean, it clearly,
makes you want to follow up.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple other things that were important: temperature and humidity. So they were less significant, but they found that increased temperature had increased aggression, and that actually increased humidity had decreased aggression.
And I think increased humidity is lower barometric pressure. I think.
Interesting.
I need to look that up.
I thought that as well. Like, why would increased humidity decrease aggression? But maybe people were just like kind of too hot and bothered to do anything.
Except get rounded up and brought to the hospital.
The hospital. But they did feel that temperature and humidity may have had less of a significance in the study because these patients were inside. So there was some climate control that they were experiencing because they're indoors. Maybe it would have more of an impact if they were outside, right?
I'm checking into the barometric pressure situation. Some experts believe pressure and humidity are unrelated, but pressure likely does affect relative humidity. However, the difference between atmospheric pressure at different locales likely doesn't impact humidity to a significant degree. Temperature is the primary factor affecting humidity.
Humidity, interesting.
But the absolute humidity is proportional to pressure, as air expands in low pressure and vapor is spread in a greater volume. So lower pressure is more likely to cause humidity because it spreads the air out in a greater volume.
There's correlation there.
And what does that have to do with the moon? Does the moon cause changes in pressure?
Oh, I don't think so, right?
I don't know. Does the moon cause
changes in pressure?
When the moon is overhead, its gravity causes Earth's atmosphere to bulge towards it. So the pressure or weight of the atmosphere on that side of the planet goes up.
So what's the correlation exactly? So
if the moon is overhead, the gravity causes Earth's atmosphere to bulge towards it. So the pressure or weight of the atmosphere on that side of the planet goes up. Higher pressure increases the temperature of the air parcels below. Since warmer air can hold more moisture, the same air parcels are now farther from the moisture capacity. It's like the container becomes larger at higher pressure.
Oh, interesting.
The relative humidity affects rain, he said, because lower humidity is less favorable for precipitation.
So the side of the Earth that's experiencing night has a higher pressure?
Looks like it.
We're learning something new every day.
When the moon is overhead or underfoot, the air pressure is higher.
Well, something else, too, that was in one of the studies that mentions about atmospheric pressure is that it's different between genders when it related to suicide attempts. For men, they're more likely to attempt suicide if there's a lower atmospheric pressure, and for women, it occurs when there's a higher atmospheric pressure. It doesn't really give a lot of details how significant or high of a correlation this is, but there was enough that they mentioned it. So that's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Huh.
What's different between men and women?
Right.
To make the moon a factor.
Well, I'm sure that, the higher atmospheric pressure is better just because women are better. Well, yeah, I don't know. So, it also said that women were more susceptible to weather changes overall than men.
I wonder if that's more of a factor that, women are more likely to have mood disorders than men. So maybe it's just, there's just more of them to be affected.
That's a good point. And one other thing is they looked at kind of suicide data and temperature, and they found that in the United States and Mexico, for every degree Celsius increase in temperature, there was a 0.7% of increase in suicide attempts in the United States and 2.1% in Mexico. They're saying that in 50 years, actually not even, in 26 years, that there could be up to 40,000 more suicides a year if the temperature increases as expected from global warming. So it's kind of interesting, right?
All the more reason to get that vacuum up and running.
Right?
Come on.
Yeah, like we do that. Yeah,
Yikes.
so it's just interesting, right?
We have a chance to prevent suicides, people.
Yeah.
Get it together.
And then kind of looking at a few other things about like aggressive behavior. So they did, as we mentioned earlier, find increased temperature impacting aggression. A 2007 study found that there was a triple the risk of death actually during heat waves from psychiatric patients as well. They felt like maybe there's some theories they may have less body temperature regulation, or the psychiatric medications may be even impacting that to some degree.
So heat is a problem. Yeah, that definitely leads to more aggression.
You know, as a whole, I did think it was interesting that the moon really did not have too much of an impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really thought that there was going to be something to say, but it's just an illusion.
It's an illusion.
It's an illusion.
It's an illusion. We correlate.
Correlation. Oh, well. Well, do you have any plans for the weather this week?
Well, I've personally been watching X-Men 97 a whole lot, and I'm really loving it. And
tell me about it. What's that?
So they took the X-Men cartoon from 1997, and they've continued it. They continued the story, except they've obviously made the animation better, the actions better. They kind of flesh out characters a little bit better, especially like Jean Grey and Storm. And so Storm is pretty epic in the new cartoon,
as she should be,
as she was
originally.
Exactly right, the goddess of weather. Yeah. So I wrote down some of her quotes. I thought we would just like maybe scream out because we're talking about weather, and it would be kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it in my Storm voice. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
He has not yet felt the force of the elements!
That's a good one.
Go ahead, T. Give it a try. Pick one of them.
So she has some kind of accent?
Oh, I think she's African, but my African accent's not the greatest.
Wind and water, whirl and rage!
That was actually really good. I knew you were gonna nail that. That's so good. Yeah. So let's see.
What else is Storm talking about?
Storm, mistress of the elements, commands you to release the child.
What was that story? Who had the child?
I don't know. We have to find out. You want to do one more?
Sure. All right. From the ends of the earth, sent limitless cold upon him.
See, you have a new career now. You're going to be on X-Men.
Love X-Men.
I do too.
I mean, the Charles and the Metallo? What's his name?
Magneto.
Magneto.
Yes.
Metallico.
That's pretty much what it does.
Their relationship
is so interesting, right?
Yeah, that was a special relationship.
Yeah.
I enjoy watching them both on the screen.
Yeah, it was great. And even in the cartoon, they kind of, because Magneto's kind of the anti-hero, but at times he acts as helps. Yeah. And then, but he always has that relationship with Charles because they both are very powerful mutants, and they have that kind of respect for each other. It's a great show.
And they kind of came of age together, right? But they sort of parted ways for different lifestyle reasons. But
do you have a favorite X-Men?
I mean, I love Storm.
Storm, yeah.
And I like, I love Jean Grey.
Yes.
I mean, all her powers. I would love to have all her powers. Control over them, but yeah. But the other one, the girl that, the shapeshifter.
Oh, Mystique?
Mystique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Mystique.
That would be like the most real world, like, usable power, right? Like, you know what I mean? Because, like, really, would you want to be controlling tornadoes? but I mean,
right.
But I mean,
I
like,
respect Storm, but I don't have control over the weather.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, because it could go awry, right? You make a tornado and then it
takes people
twists
out.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Mystique's power is like real world. Like, it'd be kind of cool just to shapeshift into anybody.
Be anybody.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your favorite?
I would say it kind of changes, but I really do like Gambit a lot. Just like, because he's kind of not always considered the most powerful, but he's always like in the mix, I really like them all, but yeah, Gambit's probably my favorite.
Which one would you not want to have?
I would say Nightcrawler because he teleports, and I don't know, just having your body like disintegrate and reappear somewhere else is kind of freaky.
I would not want to be Rogue.
Yeah,
because that's just tragic. You can't ever touch
anybody.
Yeah, I would not want that power.
Is it okay that I would like to use that excuse? But sorry, I can't touch anybody.
That's right.
Leave me alone. But yeah, that's tragic. Like in the way her and Gambit love each other, but then they can't really act on it.
Yeah.
Which makes you wonder: is that why it keeps that love alive? Because it's like it's so close but so far. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like X-Men.
Yeah.
It explores lots of human emotions.
It does. It's a great show. Highly recommend. So, well,
I think that does it for
that
weather.
does it for us.
See y'all next time.
Yep. See you guys. Thank you.